So hi Marcus, welcome to the channel. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you very much. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. The sun is shining, I am not complaining, and it's 25 degrees, which is something we rarely get here in the UK, so yes. Okay, perfect. Right, let's go. So the first section I have is about the game's creation. So what inspired you to create Dead of Darkness? Were there any specific games, movies or books that influenced you?
So the biggest influence is definitely the first Resident Evil game, obviously, and of course also games like, for example, The Eternal Darkness. But apart from these survival horror games, when it comes to the actual story, a lot of influences came from books, for example, like Annihilation or several short stories from Clive Barker, because I wanted to have this cosmic horror influence in the game, but not necessarily in terms of just being Lovecraftian, but also having other influences. Also, Berserk, for example, was an influence, and to a certain degree, also Prince of Darkness from John Carpenter, because there's this mix of supernatural powers as well as scientific approaches to explain it and to work on that, and that were big influences for the story, for example.
Okay, cool, excellent. We do all love RE. I mean, most games I think are stem from the Resident Evil series, and they are just fantastic. If we get a new one at some point, that'd be even better. So. Okay, awesome. So how did the idea for the setting and story come together?
The specific setting for this desolate island, for example, that is set somewhere near Britain, the main inspiration for that came from the game Clive Barker's Undying, which was released, I think, sometime in the early 2000s, which had a similar setting. And that always intrigued me. There's also this twisted family tale going on, and I wanted to use that and to create a different story with some other influences in that as well. When you have, for example, the Books of Blood from Clive Barker, the main influences were the Midnight Meat Train for some of the lore that's going on in the game, and in the Hills, the Cities, that short story, for example, was also a huge influence.
Okay, cool, amazing. Yeah, it's been a while since I've watched the Midnight Meat Train, but I did really enjoy that. That was really, really gripping and thrilling. And the twist at the end, I was not expecting that. So, okay, cool. So can you walk us through the early development stages? What did the first version of the game look like?
The first version was a little less focused on combat, and the whole game world at that stage was interconnected. So enemies were able to follow you through rooms, through doors. There were also some stalker-like enemies. When you check out my Twitter and go way back to, I think, the first stuff I shared around 2022, you can still see that. But in the end, I didn't like it because it sometimes ruined the pacing and didn't match with the general creepy vibe I wanted to have with the game. It was sometimes super stressful and it didn't feel right. So I removed that so that the room stands on its own and scrapped the whole stalker enemy idea. I think there are 2 sections in the game where that still happens, but from the rest it got cut out.
Mm-hmm. When you say about the sort of stalker situation, it reminds me of the game The Thing by John Carpenter, where it smashes through the wall or comes through the door. Well, actually, they don't even use the door; they just come through the wall. Really intrusive.
Yeah, there are some sections where enemies break the walls and give the impression of stalking you, but that's all scripted because it just fits the specific moment in the game and it doesn't happen dynamically.
Yeah, okay, cool, amazing. So what tools and engines are you using to build the game?
So I was experimenting a lot. When I was a kid, around 2001, I did a lot of games on RPG Maker, so naturally first iteration or the first concept was made, and I think it was RPG Maker MV, but it didn't work due to performance. Just all the ideas when I wanted to have multiple enemies on screen, it stopped working, so I scrapped it pretty fast. I tried Unity, but I didn't like it personally. That's just personal preference. I didn't like it for a 2D game, so eventually I tried out Game Maker, and that worked out pretty well. So most of the entire game, I think I started in September 2022, I started rebuilding everything in Game Maker, and that was the engine that was used until the end when it was released.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, when I first had a look at the game and you kind of gifted me the key, And I thought, do you know what, right, I like this because I've always really enjoyed 2D games, which remind me very much of like the old JRPG games and the way that they're designed. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And I'm so glad that you chose to use that engine because I think it's pretty awesome. So
The main inspiration actually for the whole art style was Romancing Sagas 3. That's all the way the characters and the color palettes. It was the get-go idea how to set up the game, how to set the art style actually. So the RPG has always been a big influence. I think will continue to be for the rest of the series.
oh, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. So, and then the last question in this section are, were there any major features or ideas that had to be cut during development?
Not necessarily. There were some ideas to have a more choose your own adventure style of decisions in the game, so that decisions you make in the game influence basically how the narrative plays out. But I scrapped that pretty fast because I wanted to have this coherent story that everyone experiences the same story. That's also why there are multiple endings, because there's just one that I wanted to have to continue the story later on. So that was maybe something that was a bit experimented on, but then ultimately scrapped.
Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. I do like games with multiple endings because it means you're not just getting like a set ending. It's like, oh, what happens now? Oh, what could have happened here? In like a cliffhanger. So
I think it's always weird when you have 4 or 5 different endings at the end, and then the sequel comes out and you say, okay, ending number 3 was canon, the rest is scrapped. I think it's pretty weird. I didn't want it to have that, but I understand the appeal that it makes also for replayability.
yeah. Okie dokie. So this is about the game's challenges. So what has been the biggest challenge you've faced while developing Dead of Darkness?
Biggest challenge was actually not so much developing, but marketing the game, because I'm making this whole development game dev stuff as a side game. So I have a full-time day job, and then in the time that's left, I develop the game. And squeezing in also time to make something in terms of marketing, that's pretty challenging. That's finding the time to do that and finding the resources to do that. That was a huge challenge. But as far as development goes, maybe we can talk about this maybe later. Maybe balancing, especially a survival horror game, would be in terms of development be a big challenge.
Okay, so I know sometimes when game developers want to market out, I think the best form to do that has been social media, because I've noticed over the last couple of weeks, I mean, I use X, or formerly Twitter, why they called it that, that is a great market push for like content creators and things to obviously spread the word a little bit more, and then you have your, I don't know what you call it, like your Reddit of the internet as well, which is obviously very what's the word I would use? Sometimes it's nice and sometimes it's very controversial. So you have to be careful how you market stuff on there.
Yeah, you have to be careful, and just finding sometimes it's just super stressful, because there was a time when it was like, okay, I haven't posted something new in like 2 weeks. I have absolutely no time to create something, and then you just try to figure out, okay, what kind of stuff that I'm currently working on could I use and put out there, and this is sometimes really stressful, and also finding the right place to find the right target group, for example, especially for such a niche game where you have survival horror, but then it's also 2D, then it's also this JRPG aesthetic. It's a niche target group, and finding them can be pretty tough. In the end, I'm happy with how it turned out. There are a lot of people playing the game right now, but getting there was definitely a challenge.
Oh, I can imagine. Did you? So obviously, when you pushed the game with marketing for Steam, were they sort of really supportive and super helpful in pushing that out for you, or?
You mean Steam or who?
On Steam, yeah. Because my key is for Steam.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mean when pushing out the codes, for example, there were a lot of creators that asked for codes and made content for that. Steam itself doesn't support you all that much, because as long as the game isn't released, nothing much happens at the platform really. So it's just there, and it relies on what you do outside of the platform. And there have been a lot of creators that have asked for keys and streamed the game and were super helpful. So that's a great experience.
Oh, okay, fantastic. And also the great thing about being a content creator is that when you stream the game and and viewers tune in, they're like, oh, this is really amazing. And then that goes in, they think, oh, I'm going to go and download, I'm going to play that for myself. And then they're a streamer as well. Then they share on the game.
Yeah.
I think that's so lovely.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, cool. So the last question in this section is, so were there any moments where you felt like giving up? If so, how did you manage to push through?
I don't think that there was really just this moment where I thought I quit, because like I said, I had created some horror games back with RPG Maker 20 years ago. So I basically, once you've done that, once you've created a game that's 30 to maybe 4 hours long, you basically have a rough idea of what's in for the ride, so you know what to expect. So I wasn't really in a point where I said, okay, I don't know, it's just too much, I don't know how to handle it. But there were definitely frustrating moments where you sit at your desk the whole evening just trying to figure out why a certain bug is happening, and you sit there and say, I'm wasting 4 hours just figuring out why he doesn't pick up that or that item, for example. That were frustrating moments, but you get over it and then you just...
Yeah, I think it's always good, because I know that obviously there is always a solution for something. Obviously, sometimes it might not sort of click straight away, but as long as you've got it sort of all figured out, and then if it happens again and you're thinking, that's all right, I already overcame that problem the other day, I know how to sort it. Cool. So the next section is about the game's design. So the atmosphere and horror elements are really strong. How did you approach creating that tense feeling?
When you have a game like that's top down and 2D and pixel art, you have to approach it, I think, a little bit different than when it's a first person realistic looking game, for example. So what I did, apart from having this creepy music and whole audio design, is that I tried to create the levels as tense as possible. So my idea was basically to put as much attention into really basic stuff that you do. For example, when you want to unlock a door, you have to go into the menu, select the key, use it in order to unlock the door while the menu isn't stopping the game. So there's also in this very basic tasks a little bit of tension. And I wanted to have basically every journey you make from safe room to the next safe room, or from a safe room to a puzzle and back, feel like when you're playing Dark Souls for the first time and you're just trying on your last limb to reach the next bonfire, to have this kind of tension transferred into survival horror. That was my idea. That's what I tried to do in order to keep the stakes high most of the time, and put an extra tension apart from the creepy atmosphere.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I could definitely relate with the well, I'll call it Soulsborne feeling, because there's nothing like feeling under sort of exceptional pressure. And then sort of thinking, now what's my next move? What am I going to do now?
There's been a few people that have been frustrated by that, but when you look closer at it and read the feedback probably most of the time, I think, they were anxious, they were stressed, and that was the goal of having that in the game, so once it worked.
Okay, cool. So the next question is, how did you balance combat, exploration, and puzzles to keep the pacing interesting?
As far as puzzles go, honestly, it was just experimentation based on personal preference. I didn't have a really clear idea. I tried to have puzzles for basically getting a bit of attention out of the game. So you have intense combat encounters, then maybe a puzzle. You can play around with that a bit and try to create this pattern of combat, puzzle, and then mix it up by having multiple combat encounters in a row to basically increase the tension. So that was a lot of experimentation. As far as, for example, exploration goes, I tried to also here, Dark Souls was to use institution inspiration, because I wanted to have this interconnected world in a game that opens up step by step, so you unlock your shortcuts as well, so that you can visit places you've been to before, and collect items you maybe have missed or that were locked before. So that was something in order to keep also old locations a bit interesting as you progress in the game. And as far as combat goes, it was just playtesting basically, because the first version of the game was so much harder than it is right now. And I remember inviting the first playtesters to play it, and they were like, "Well, they said, Marcus, I've been playing Resident Evil on hard mode for 10 years now, and I can't get through the demo, for example." So there was a lot of playtesting, a lot of adjusting, and it ultimately that's why I also integrated multiple different settings so that everyone, based on their skill level, can enjoy the game.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I know personally myself that when I'm sort of struggling to get through something and I'm sitting there in my community looking at me like, I think she's going to tear out her hair in a minute. So it's always nice to have a game that's, you know, very user friendly. And I know obviously with some of the games, to say like, for example, like with Resident Evil, some of the puzzles can be incredibly challenging. There's always one in RE4 Remake that they have with the tablets. I don't know if you've played that game yet, but you have to turn them and they're in a certain position, all like with the grandfather clocks. And I'm thinking, I've got monsters chasing me here and I'm under a lot of pressure and this isn't working.
It's really challenging to make puzzles in a way that they are not, you don't want them necessarily as a roadblock. You want players to be smart about them and to figure them out, but they shouldn't be a roadblock, but they also shouldn't be too easy, so that you say, okay, what's the point here? Why is it even in the game? And finding that balance can be pretty tricky. It's a lot of experimentation in the end.
Oh, okay, cool. Amazing. Okay, cool. So are there any small details or hidden things in the game that you're particularly proud of?
So the story from Dead of Darkness, as I envisioned it, goes across multiple stories or multiple games in the end. So there are a lot of very subtle plantings in the first game that will have to pay off much later in the overall story. Some are maybe some you can notice, some you probably won't notice. But in case I'm able to tell the story across multiple further games, when you go back one day, you will play Dead of Darkness again and say, okay, that was here already. I didn't know that. So that's pretty cool, I think. That's something that I'm proud of, that I've found a way to integrate this in a very subtle way. And I also like the lore for the whole game, because there's a lot going on that you don't see in the game that's hidden in some of the documents. You don't need to read them necessarily to understand the plot. But I think I'm pretty proud of the world that I've created at that point.
Oh, okay, that's fantastic to hear. Yeah, I think there's nothing better than when you've made a game and thinking, I made that. That is super incredible. And obviously, when obviously we'll get to that in a minute, but whether you're thinking, yep, the game did absolutely brilliant, let's bring on a sequel or let's bring on a prequel or something like that. So now that's really, you should be super proud. Definitely super proud. So this is about the fans in the community. So what's the feedback from players been like so far? Obviously, minus the playtesting that you just mentioned. And has it shaped any changes to the game?
I'd say the overall feedback, if you look at websites that have posted reviews and the Steam reviews, is pretty good. I'm happy with the response, especially since this is the first commercial release that I've done. There are things in the feedback that definitely, now that I think about it, make sense and that will address in the next games that I make. There are also some stuff that's just part of the design, how I like it. So I have to think about some of the points that have been criticized by some of the reviewers. I'm going to change them or I'm going to handle that. But overall, it's been really interesting to see all these different opinions and different views on the game, because you also see the game has been played by a lot of people who are really into the survival genre and who are around my age, 35 years plus. But there are also a lot of younger people who have not this experience with the classic Resident Evil games, and they have a totally different view on how the game should work and what caught them off guard. So finding the mix on how to evolve the sequel, for example, and how to change it up a bit will be definitely interesting, but the feedback has been super valuable at this point.
Okay, that's perfect. Well, that kind of ties into our next question, because I was going to say, so how important has the indie horror community been to your development journey?
Super important. We talked about this before. If there hadn't been all the streamers that played, for example, the demo or the game when it came out, or Just reposted some of the stuff that I posted on X or on Blue Sky, or all the showcases that have been happening that are focused on horror games. If they hadn't happened, the game wouldn't have reached such an audience. So I'm super thankful for everyone who has played the game or reposted something or just told the friends about them. It's super helpful for me, and I'm really, really happy.
Okay, fantastic. That's great to hear. So this is actually about the future of the game. So from continuing from what we were discussing earlier. So what's next for Dead of Darkness? Any plans for expansions, sequels, or other projects?
We're actually right now working, well, I am working on a sequel. I have written script, first iteration at least. It's been finished for, I think, 2 weeks now. And right now we're working on the creature concept art for the next game. So it's all pretty early in production right now, but we definitely want to continue the story.
Okay, fantastic. That's great to hear. So then I can keep my eyes peeled in the future and I can reach back out to him and be like, Marcus, I see you've got a sequel that works. Okay, cool. Amazing. So would you like to work with a bigger team or publisher in the future, or do you prefer staying indie?
It all in the end, it all depends how independent I can be when it comes to the creative process. For example, even for this game right now, I'm working together with the publisher East Asia Soft, who are developing the console parts for the game and who have also supported me in making the whole voiceover happen. And working with them, for example, was super great. There was zero influence on the creative decisions, and that has been great experience, for example. So in the end, I'm open to all kinds of collaborations and all kinds of constellations, but it's important for me to have this creative freedom creating the game, the world.
Oh, okay, perfect. I suppose it's also nice as well because it kind of takes the pressure off you a little bit, like you said, like with the concept art and the voiceovers and things like that. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, the people the freelancers that I work with on the next game are more or less the same that I've worked on the first game. So that's always great when you have people around you or in your team that basically understand the vision that you have for what you want to do, and you speak the same language, and this makes the whole process so much easier because you don't need to over-explain what you're looking for, what you want to achieve, because they just get it, and that's super cool that all these people are getting back together now.
Okay, superb. That's great to hear. And I've got the last section here, which are fun and quick fire questions. So what's your all-time favorite horror game?
That's actually Resident Evil 1, because that's a game, whenever I play this or whenever I see someone playing it, it just glues me to the controller. So I just stick with it and play it for hours. It's the same as when I'm watching TV and I'm zapping through and there's a casino or Wolf of Wall Street going on. I'm watching this movie to the end. I just can't switch it off, and that's the same with Resident Evil 1 for me.
Oh, cool. So I have to ask then, so when you say Resident, are we talking OG or are we talking remake?
I like both really much. I personally enjoyed the original, but that's mostly, I guess, due to nostalgia, because this was the very first horror game I think that I played. And I liked the remake as well, but first one, the original game, has a special place in my heart, so I would pick that.
Oh, amazing. See, I'm going to hold my hands up. I'm guilty because I never actually played the original, but I need to. Okay, perfect. That's awesome. So the second from last question is, if you could have any horror movie monster cameo in Dead of Darkness, who would it be?
Yeah, that's a super tough one. I think I wouldn't pick some iconic creature or something like Pinhead or something. I think what I would pick is, have you seen this movie Mimic from the 90s?
Is that the one with, is it Mira Sorvino with the bugs and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. These monsters, I think, I'm not exactly sure. I think they're called Judas Breed or so. And I think these creatures, they would fit into the universe at least. I don't know if necessarily in the first game, but from the vibe they have, how they behave and how they act, this was something. This would be a creature that could fit in the game somehow.
Okay, cool. See, now I want to go back and watch that because I've only ever seen it like once. So very nostalgic throwback there. Cool. And then the last question is, what 3 words would you use to describe Dead of Darkness?
Okay, I would say first one would be creepy. The second one would be brutal in very different ways, not with on-screen violence. And the third one would be self-aware.
Oh, okay, cool, amazing. All right, well, thank you very much, Marcus, for taking the time out of your day to chat with me today. I really do appreciate it, and I wish you all the best in your sequel. And we'll have to reach out to you as soon as you have popped that out on the internet.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, no worries. You're very, very welcome.